San Diego is famous for many different things: microbreweries, golf, surf, a lot of seals and seals. What brought you there?
Actually, technology. So I started a startup right out of college, in college, and then right out of it. And my co-founder was a Naval Academy student here in the U.S. He got deployed, which is part of the reason why the startup ultimately failed. And after the deployment, he was stationed here in San Diego. I was really excited about potentially, standing the startup back up.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't end up happening, but it brought me out here. And then I got into software as a software engineer, and then eventually started my company. And then I met my wife here, which is why I'm now here for the rest of my life.
How about we'll just talk about insurance software and the agencies that you serve. Tell us about XILO. What do you guys do? And then we can dive into it, how it came about.
Yes. So XILO is a platform.
XILO, for God's sake. XILO, it's only when you want to buy a house. But yes,
Exactly.
XILO.
Honestly, back in the day, we used to get a lot of people that would call us Zillow, a lot of agents in the space. So I'm so used to it. But XILO is a workflow automation platform primarily for insurance agents, right? And that's kind of a broad spectrum of potential companies that we have as customers. It could be an agent that's part of a brokerage. That's a very common customer of ours, but it also could be agents that are working within a bank or a credit union, or even some of the large FANG organizations that are out there that have agents that help manage risk, because they have a lot more risk than other people. And so, but XILO is a workflow automation platform that also has a customer experience layer so that you can modernize their experience for those who are trying to purchase or who need servicing on the insurance side. But then you have this workflow automation platform that will automate as much as possible for the actual agents themselves.
Why do we need it?
Well, we're living in this world today where you can literally get an Amazon package faster than an insurance quote.
Mm-hmm.
Consumers have much higher expectations for how they should be serviced in this insurance world. And sadly, we're a laggard in all industries in terms of meeting those expectations. And so the only way you can really solve that is by implementing modern software right at the core where the problem is. And that's where the agents are operating. And I'm not sitting here proclaiming it's their fault, right? They're using a lot of disparate technology. They have a lot of different processes. One of the problems we have to solve as a business is it's a highly fragmented industry.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is doing something slightly different with slightly different systems. And to unify it all is a big challenge that an amazing, ambitious startup company can solve. And that's what we're doing here today.
Automation. So I've been in the insurance industry for about 10 years now. I've been hearing about automation, carrier automation, agency automation for 10 years. And even then they kept repeating, hey, we need this automation. And we've been talking about it for 10, 20 years. So why do we still need new solutions about automations? Where are we missing that?
It's interesting. It's a great question at the top. And I think it's best answered when you get down to the individual user level in this market. And the users are the insurance agents and the insured, the consumers. And what we see a lot of is that there is no real automation implemented in a majority of the organizations that we talk to. You would think there would be. There are a lot of different pointed solutions that have come out. And I haven't been in the industry longer than 6 years, so I don't know what was pre-existing prior to that. But I can say with full confidence that, especially as you start talking to, let's say, larger brokerages, larger financial institutions, those types of organizations, most of them are using maybe an agency management system, maybe a rater system. They might be adopting some sort of CRM. A lot of them are starting to look at Salesforce, but there are still disparate systems that lack full workflow automation and, let's say, customer experience engagement, and tie those things together in a way that can truly automate workflows and reduce time, the time it takes to complete certain tasks in this world. And so I don't know, but I can quite confidently say that majority of the people we speak to don't have any layer of automation in their businesses.
Which is funny and not funny, because while we are talking about automation, we're already looking at AI, Gen AI, and all these new trends and new tools. And I just wonder if that's going to be a leapfrog towards the Gen AI. And then, of course, that's only a buzzword if you don't really wrap it with a product that the agencies can actually use. So I don't know if you watched I talked about empowering the agent on various episodes in the past, and I'm a big advocate for empowering agents and providing them with the right solutions, especially as we are looking at, let's call it the old guard or the boomer that are leaving the workforce, and the new entrants that are going to replace them, but don't have the right products to sell to the new risk and the customer experience. How are you closing the gap of the customer experience for the agencies and providing the right tools to the new generation? And the new generation is Gen X and hopefully millennials, which are not young. They are entering their 40s soon enough.
Yep. You know, it's interesting because kind of in the topic of conversation, as you know, more veteran agents start to retire and new agents have to come up and become licensed and actually start working in the market. What we hear a lot about from our customers is more of a staffing problem. You know, they're sitting here and they're really concerned because they're about to lose someone that has been selling insurance for 20, 30 years, and they have no idea how they're going to replace them. And then if you do that at scale within the organization, you have a real problem. And so they're thinking, like, how do I get one person, one new hire, assuming that their success rate on new hires is going to be low, to do the work of 2, 3, or 4 individuals that are retiring. And so when we speak to a lot of forward-thinking VPs and managers within these kind of larger organizations, that's what they're concerned about. And that's where I think your points about AI are very important. I think without AI, it's not possible. I think you might be able to increase productivity, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50%. But in order to get it up to 100, 200, 300% per rep, you're going to really need to implement both software and AI to make that happen. But in terms of that customer experience gap, XILO has identified over the time by working hands-on with agents that are at the front lines, all the different types of customer experiences that they would need in order to have a modern business that's highly attractive to a modern consumer. And we've built out these modern experiences that our customers can white label. And we've built all of these internal tools that we or they can use to customize the entire experience, which is how you solve the fragmentation problem. And it's something that only we do. Even if you take something that seems as simple as data intake, it's actually very complex in the insurance world. It's probably simple everywhere else when you look into maybe a software sales process or some other sales process. But for insurance, data intake is extremely complex. The way you do data intake from one organization to the next could be so vastly different, and you could be selling from the same carrier, the same product lines in the same state, right? And so solving that fragmentation problem is the only real way that you'll also be able to solve the customer experience problem. And so implementing that customer experience layer, white labeling it, and then building internal tools that enable us to customize these to the exact degree that is needed was how we kind of started to solve that gap.
Let's talk about the industry, or let's break down the players and the problem. Because we talk about automation, we hear it a lot. You talk about the challenges within the agency, small agency, big agency. Who are the players and what are the software and tools that they are using today? Because there is a difference between someone who just got his license and is going to work for an agency, is going to be a producer, is going to be an indie, or is going to be a part of going to be a captive. How does it work? What does it mean for the different tools that they are using? And where is your product, your automation comes into play?
That's an interesting question because It differs definitely by the stage that that organization's at. We get a lot of inbound requests from what you might want to call a startup agency. It might be a captive that's moving independent. It might be a captive agent that wants to open up their own independent shop, or an independent agent that wants to open up their own shop. It could be a startup. Literally, we've had startup fintech companies that are trying to open up insurance divisions. They reach out a lot for our software, but we typically don't have the capability in servicing those types of organizations because, as you could imagine, it's a highly tailored product with the highly, we put a lot of service effort into making sure that the product is perfect for our customer. But those organizations, they are what I would consider, I consider them to be the types that are really yearning for that type of software, because they don't want to start their process off, in this kind of old-fashioned way. They want to build things that are extremely modern. They're envisioning themselves as like a Next Insurance or like a Lemonade or a Geico Direct or a Progressive. They envision online experiences and everything being done digitally and everything as automated as possible, right? And so they always kind of start from there. And that's how a lot of them find us. And whether we work with them or not just highly depends on the organization. But what we see a lot of times with, like, let's say a larger brokerage, let's say they're a top 100 P&C brokerage, is they're operating in a very similar way that they have been for the last 10 or 15 years. And these organizations have been talking about for a long time, there needs to be a change, right? There needs to be a change to help them streamline operations, to help them become more modern, to help them with the future staffing problem that we just discussed. And as we present ourselves as more of a holistic platform versus maybe a small solution that can solve one specific problem, it excites them. And then we get down the path of, hey, how highly customizable this is and how we can tailor it not just to them as an agency, but a lot of the agencies that we work with that are in that category, they might have hundreds of offices, and each office might do things differently. And so they're trying to solve the same fragmentation problem that we've already solved. And so for our own business. And so it's extremely challenging for them to actually streamline operations when you have Floridian agencies that you've acquired and Californian agencies you've acquired and Northeastern agencies you've acquired, and they're all using different agency management systems, and they're all using different comparative rating systems, and some are writing small commercials, some are writing big, some write a little bit of life and health. It's very fragmented. And so, as you can imagine, having a holistic platform that can help you capture all that, and then being the service, both on the software, on the human-led side, that can collectively unify and standardize processes across hundreds of fragmented agencies across the United States, it's very appealing for these types of organizations, while also modernizing your brand and increasing sales because of the what modernizing your brand does for conversions.
Who's your main customer? Is that the indie agent, the big agencies? Now we see the gorillas, kind of the gorilla agencies that were established because of acquisitions that you already mentioned. You have the different network of are you working with carriers, with captives? Who's your typical customer?
Typical customer is a large insurance brokerage that does P&C and maybe a little bit of life. Yeah. That's a typical customer, right? That's a majority of our customers. But over the last 12 months, we've been seeing a lot more banks, credit unions, and I mean a lot, like a surprising volume, because there's a tight-knit community in that category of, insurance arms. And then now we're starting to see, organizations that you wouldn't even believe work in the insurance space reach out as well. And so I think over time, and interestingly enough, a lot of international opportunity as well. It's not uncommon for people from other countries to see us through SEO or something of the sort, to tell us they have the same problems that we're having here in the US, and to want us to open up an office in Australia or Germany or something of the sort, which has its regulatory barriers and constraints, which is why we haven't, and we're waiting. But there's a lot of market pull. I feel like most markets have very similar problems in the insurance space.
I'm sorry, what's the regulation challenges because you're a software, unless we are talking about GDPR?
It's not just GDPR. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you get into Germany, for example, I'm sure you probably know much more about international markets than I do, but just from what I've learned through working with programs and the customers, Germany has an extra layer beyond GDPR, very specific requirements for insurance agents in general about how they have to deliver and operate in handling an insurance transaction. And it's very specific. And so your software has to follow those rules. And it's similar to GDPR in that sense, but it's very specific to Germany as an example. Because if it was just GDPR, we would be fine. We follow all GDPR best practices, but there are more rules to be followed.
This is your second or third startup?
This is my second startup.
Software. What was the first one?
The first one was an interesting one. So when I was in college, one of my childhood best friends who went to the Naval Academy, I went to University of Delaware. He reached out to me about this carpooling application he was creating. It wasn't Uber, it wasn't Lyft, obviously.
I was ready for that. Okay.
Yeah. So thought I was going to throw you a curveball, didn't you? No. And so it
I'm
was
talking to you from my private island outside of Belize. Yes, please continue.
And so we wanted to create something more like BlaBlaCar in kind of Europe and international markets here in the United States. And so our first goal was, can we get college kids to ride home together when they're having vacations? And then we wanted that to expand into leisure travel, leisure carpooling that was safe and that was, routine, like BlaBlaCar is out in Europe. And we actually, through good PR and decent marketing, we had a few thousand people downloading the application, probably a few hundred people using it. We didn't monetize anything because we didn't know what we were doing. But ultimately, what ended up happening is my co-founder, he was the main tech guy. He was the CTO of the company, and he was being deployed because after you graduate from the Naval Academy, you have to serve a deployment. And once he got deployed, the application crashed. You couldn't log in. I had no idea about how to work on iOS frameworks at the time, and I couldn't physically fix the application. Lots of support emails, literally nothing I could do. And I was way too young and lacked the knowledge on how to build a strategic venture, to raise capital or to do something about it in that sense. I had no money to be able to afford a dev contractor to assist. It was just a fight for life that ended in an unfortunate way.
And moving forward from that adventure and lessons learned, you find myself again developing a software company, but this time for insurance. How did you end up How did you end up in insurance and kept doing software? If the first, or was it a direct path?
It was a direct. Well, I wouldn't say the insurance aspect of it was
not
a
the insurance,
direct.
the software development.
The software was a direct path. I really fell in love with tech and software and startups after I started that endeavor. I come from a small city in Dover, or in Delaware, called Dover. That's where I hail from. So where I'm from, we didn't know what computer science was, right? When my co-founder, who was the Naval Academy student, told me he was majoring in computer science, I literally had no idea what that meant, but I just trusted him and thought that was cool. As I started going through college and as I got closer to graduation, I started to understand more about tech, but I hadn't been so fascinated with software engineering as I am today. Mm-hmm. And so that endeavor and failing because the technology failed is actually what propelled me to learn how to code myself. Eventually, it landed me an actual software engineering position. And then eventually I got tired of that and decided to start my own software company. And so that's why software. I've always been so compelled with software and technology. And now I'm also compelled with AI and where that's going. And so I get very excited about things like that. The reason why I got into insurance is because my other childhood best friend, we're like three best friends. He had grown up in it. So my co-founder, who's also run sales here at XILO, his dad had started a non-standard auto shop, a non-standard auto independent agency in the early 90s when my co-founder was first born. And he grew that from the ground up, not knowing anybody in the industry, not knowing anything about insurance. and eventually built a sizable insurance agency out on the East Coast here in the United States. During that, my co-founder, obviously, as growing up in the agency, started out as maybe a secretary taking phones at 13, and then eventually became somewhat involved at sales at 16, got a license and became a licensed agent at 18. And by the time he graduated college, eventually grew his way up to become the VP of sales of that organization. And so as I was thinking, I was sitting there at my software engineering job thinking about what business I wanted to start so I didn't have to be a software engineer by trade anymore. Him and I got together and started talking about the problems that his agency was having. And it really excited me about what we could do with software to solve those problems. And that's what got me into insurance.
So, entrepreneur, autodidact, dove into software development, decided that, hey, I can still do software development, but I want my own business again and my own independence. Insurance looks like a great opportunity. There are a lot of opportunities, and let me bring someone who grew up within the insurance industry and knows it back and forth. And these guys have this type of many problems. Okay, am I right so far, more or less?
Yep, you got it.
And according to our earlier conversation, you wake up at 3 a.m., go for a run, do cold showers, and you don't run marathons. Do you? No.
I used to, but now the mile takes too long. It takes out of work, so I stopped running.
Let's go back to talk about insurance. So actually, what are the things that you learned from your your career with software that you implement today, and one of the things that kind of the delight that guides your way as you work with your customers?
It's really interesting, actually, that there's a lot of applicable experiences that came from the position I had as a software engineer. So I was at a company called Parallel 6 based here in San Diego. And not having a traditional software background, they hired me first onto the customer success team until I asked to be moved to software engineering, and then had my successes there. And interestingly enough, one of our products is a form solution that we've built that can either be customer facing or agent facing. And this is kind of what kicks off workflow automation and modernizes experiences. And Parallel 6 had built enterprise forms for clinical research organizations that could speed up the process of performing clinical trials. And we worked with very large companies like GlaxoSmithKline, for example. Mm-hmm. When you work with those companies, it is by, great definition, an enterprise process, whether it's sales, customer success, or engineering. Everything is done in the way you would do to service large enterprises. And so we would have things like pods that had designers and engineers and, project managers. And I learned through kind of observation how project management was done. When I was on the customer success side, I learned how to write requirements and things of those sort. I learned how to engage with the customers in this kind of enterprise-like fashion and what it meant to take a project from start to finish. And then I learned what it meant, as I became a software engineer at that company, how to write really clean code that was well architected, and how to disparately handle that when you have, GlaxoSmithKline in the UK, and they want their servers on premise in the UK, and what that meant from a DevOps perspective. And when you have, fragmented needs, not dissimilar to what we're doing, all these clinical research organizations, all their processes were completely different. The data that they had to collect was completely different. And so I learned that it was important to create internal tools to be able to customize these things. I learned about localization and translation and how important that was when you're international, which is something we're now just getting into on our side. And so there were a lot of applicable experiences at that company that helped me, and still help me today at XILO.
Yeah, I don't think that people truly understand that the importance of DevOps and writing clean code. Those are things that kind of under the hood, but those are the pillars and the stability of the digital product. People think, just giving the automation, just drag, drop, and throwing a few names and whatever. But having the culture, the engineering culture to do that will give you the flexibility in the long term and of course the stability to develop your product. And then there is a question of always, and everyone who has done projects, doesn't matter if it's a code or anything else, there will be the famous triangle, right, of time, quality, and money. And between that, where you're running. I know when from time to time, I do my own little hack, it will be more about, yeah, let me do it as fast as possible. The code will be horrible, and I just want to see a result. The challenge is, am I going to redo it again and again and again, and then need to think about the other elements of the automation? And I'm sure that there are better products than what I used to use in the past as Jenkins and other things like that. We chatted in the past about a different triangle of a trade-off, which is sales, customer experience, and the product. What's your philosophy about that trade-off?
I'll start from my role as the CEO of an early stage company, who also is the technical co-founder, right? And over time, I've learned that I never get the opportunity to sit in a position in the company where everything's going well. For example, if we spend 6 months building up the sales process, increasing conversions, dialing the operations and the analytics, and we have massive results and things are just going extremely well, well, then what happens? You have to support those new customers that are coming on board. Then your customer success strategy, your customer success operations, maybe even the talent you have for customer success may change based off of the new growth that you're seeing. And then what does the CEO have to do at that point? Go right back down to the bottom and figure out how to rebuild and how to implement things that are going to fix the customer success process. And we did, in the first couple of years of our business, we did a lot of that, a lot of balancing between sales and customer success, trying to figure out where we could find product market fit, who we could service best in this market and why, trying to figure out what our processes are, what our identity was. And we started to forget something, which is intuitive for most people who are probably listening, but not so intuitive when you're on the ground, which is product makes all this better and easier. The better your product is, to your point, the higher quality it is, but also the more expedient you are on delivering features to your customers as they request them, the more you'll sell and the more you'll retain in terms of your customer base. And so then you go, oh, wow, we actually have to be releasing all these grandiose, exciting features that our customers love that solve huge problems for them. And then you go over to the product side and you start delivering. And then what happens when that happens? Sales and customer success start faltering. And so it's that there is a delicate balance that you have to try to do really, really well. And I think this is what everybody calls execution. And you have to, as you get larger, you have to hire the right people to help you with that. But as an early stage company, you can't really afford to just go out and find someone who's already done it and hire a new VP until you hit certain milestones. And so that's what we were talking about when we talk about that triangle. It's such a delicate balance.
It is. And it's not easy to achieve. And I think that milestone, there are people who are a little bit lucky of getting the right co-founder or to have access to the right pool of talent, getting them cheaper or more expensive. And nothing is easy. You can be luckier, but nothing is easy. Otherwise, everyone would do it, right? That's like the famous phrase for that. Let's talk quickly about your customers, and you mentioned customer experience and use cases. Can you share a use case of success or something that we can describe as, this is a great example of a customer experience that led to a customer success?
Yeah, no, I try to omit some of the larger customers that we have because we
don't need to name names if you.
So, I'll give you one that's quite common. This is the easiest one to discuss because it's very easy for people who don't even know insurance to materialize how this happened. So a lot of customers or let's say one specific customer. We've got a very specific customer that was getting a lot of call-in business. And so what would happen is they're a very well-known agency out in a specific area. They would get referred to by, customers that already exist within the agency as clients. And the first thing that the referral would do would be go to the website, and they'd see the phone number because the website lacked the experience to kind of guide them down buying insurance like you would have with like a Lemonade or a Zebra or a Hippo. And so they're getting all this call-in business. And so they're staffing up for a big call-in business that gets a lot of inbound referrals. And they're a non-standard auto shop. So you could imagine it's a very large amount of people that are calling in. From like a process efficiency perspective, that's a lot of waste. Not only is your experience at the front end of it probably converting lowly, because a lot of, let's say, millennials and Gen Zs might not want to actually call a physical agent as their first point of contact. But additionally, you have to have staff to support all of those calls all the time. And so we implemented, first we had to kind of understand what markets this agency worked. And that's how we got down the non-standard auto case. We had to figure out what carriers they work with so that we can understand what the questionnaire needed to look like that they would place onto their website that would be a modern experience that their customers would go through. And then we wanted to understand what their goals were. Was it growth? Was it truly a reduction in cost in terms of what you can do by streamlining your operations? And most people go with both, but some people actually don't want growth at that time. In this case, it was both. And so once we did that, we built out all these different questionnaires that not only satisfied a non-standard auto client, but also tried to attempt to cross-sell different product lines as they were coming in. Maybe you want to try a little bit of life, and I need a few details in order to run you a life quote as well. Once we implemented that, and this isn't the end of the journey, but this is just the first ROI metric that was really exciting for them to see. They were literally able to 10x their online conversions. And so they started generating 500, 600 leads a month from their online business. And the best part about it was all the exact data that they needed to collect in order to process that client was collected and completely integrated into their systems automatically. And so they avoided 500 to 600, 10 to 15, maybe sometimes 30 to 45-minute phone conversations a month by doing that. So they're getting more business, more closable business, and they're reducing the time spent on all this manual work significantly, right? And then there's the workflow automation component. And so they would use us, and not everybody does, but they would use us as somewhat of a CRM, moving clients through different stages. But there are a lot of automations that go out as that's happening. And so we have a feature of what we call a client portal that once you actually have the quote and it's processed, let's say the data integrates into a Progressive, the agent goes into Progressive to finalize things, they get a quote, they can inject it back into XILO and send it out right to a client. And it's kind of like a smart proposal. They'll walk the client through the quote, allow them to take action on whether they want to make changes, whether they accept it or not. And then if there are any documents or proofs of insurance that are needed, they can upload it right in there. The agent could be requesting it and it'll send right to the agent. And so now if you have, let's say a Gen Z customer, and I hate to call out Gen Z particularly, and it could be anybody, but if you have a customer like that doesn't want to get on the phone, you have gotten this person basically from quote almost to bind without having any engagement with them at that point. And it's all automated through the system. Our system will send reminders to that client to let them know that you need to review your quote and you need to process it. Most agencies that we speak to don't follow up with last week's clients on the personal line side. And it's because they're so busy, they don't have time to. The commercial line side is much different, but on the personal line side. And so by implementing that, we were able to actually increase their close rates. And it was because their time in processing that client had dropped down significantly by almost over 50%. And I think it's a well-known fact in sales that your time to value or your time to complete increases your close rates. And so the wonderful thing about kind of evaluating ROI within an insurance agency's business is not unlike software, they have recurring revenue. So not only are they making more money from conversion growth and increased close rates on the first year, or let's say non-standard auto in that case, it was probably first 6 months, but then they make it on every renewal. And if you have decent retention rates as an agency, your ROI through the utilization of our platform always grows year over year.
Now, is the carrier and the carrier's technology kind of, let's call it a gap for you? Because not all carriers can bind. Not everyone has a technology for or a binding authority.
We don't actually offer any type of bind online.
Okay.
So yeah, the carrier is always, let's say, the laggard in the mix, but the agents are kind of living this life with the carriers anyways. So we help them do what we can without trying to rely on as much carrier involvement as possible.
Well, you help them to get to optimization within the boundaries of what they have.
Exactly. Which right now there's a lot of room for improvement on kind of an average, brokerages organizations, regardless of if you're offering bind online, which would only be with like top 10 national carriers anyways, and they probably reject most of the business out of the gate. It's very rare. So we just got to have to operate under the perspective that that's just not going to be possible for, a regional carrier or something of the sort anyways.
No, it's an interesting time because I have more and more conversations with the PEs who are looking into buying the brokerages because those are businesses, let's call them old school business that has a cash flow, they have a book of business. The PEs appreciate it. They know how to inject the right technology or new management. Really depends on the type of PE that it is. And what you're doing is basically perfect for that, especially for those private equities that they think that they have that magic, that basically you are that magic. And for everyone, it's going to be very interesting who is going to use which solution and how, and how is that going to impact the industry as a whole, especially when we are looking at when I'm talking about the industry, I'm talking about the insurance industry, because while your solution is it sounds like a drop in the bucket, but it's very vital for the distribution channels of the insurance industry. And people don't recognize and don't appreciate that there are so many different players, and the insurance industry is so vast, but everyone has a critical job that they are doing it. And that's why they are there, because there is another, not man in the middle, but let's call it an intermediary that knows how to optimize and push the needle forward, because otherwise, as you said, it's going to take months to write an insurance premium and get a business or a person to get covered on the risks. But I'm mumbling now. What advice would you give yourself for other new players who are entering the insurance industry, or to be precise, the InsurTech industry, especially with your experience as a second-time entrepreneur, a tech entrepreneur who provides technology services to the insurance industry?
And it can go in so many different directions.
Take as many directions as you want. We have all the time. No, actually, we don't.
I'm actually going to be pointed about it. This is not my most compelling piece of advice. I think it could just save someone who's listening to this some time. Start by, if you're dealing with data that's highly sensitive, start by being a highly secure system. That's something we grew into as we started selling to larger organizations. And it unveiled the significance and the importance of it. It will save you a lot of time if you're starting a company to start with that culture in your engineering team, to start with that ambition, than trying to do it 3, 4, 5, 6 years in. The investment will be less and the outcomes will be greater. And maintain it. Leverage a system like Avanta or Adrata or somebody that helps you maintain your compliances. And take that seriously. And I think that's one of the best pieces of advice I can give to someone working in insurance, because we deal with such highly sensitive data. Now, some people might not, but most people do in this space, in the InsurTech space. And so start there. Figure out your security framework, your security stack. figure out how you can be the most secure system in the market, then latch on to customers and build them a super high quality product. And that's what I would say.
Jon, that's amazing. That's a great answer. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope that you're going to have an amazing weekend, and I'll see you in New York.
I'll see you. Let's connect at ITI.